Hi everybody, very happy to be joined by John Pye, who's going to start us off with an introduction to himself and his books before we get going.
Right, thanks very much, Caroline. I was a detective, police officer with Staffordshire, and since I've retired, I've got into a bit of writing. Started off doing some local history things for the local paper, and then got into crime fiction. And I've got a trilogy of crime thrillers out at the moment, which were all based really in the time when I was actually doing the job, so in the late 80s, early 90s. So I was on fairly sound footing when I wrote those ones. I didn't have to do a great deal of research. And then more recently, I've written another one, which is Where the Silent Screams Are Loudest. Something I always wanted to do that was based on the more modern technology that we've got in the police force nowadays, with DNA and this sort of thing. So that did entail a lot of research because I was well behind the curve on that. I'd not really been involved in that sort of thing at all. I also managed to incorporate this into the story, a bit of genealogy, so family history searching, which was used as an interesting tool in that particular story. So that's about me.
So I was interested in this when you said it, because you said you left the police force in like the 90s.
That's right.
But DNA wasn't really sort of commonly used, which I believe, but I do believe it was being used in the 90s. Because we had things like the O.J. Simpson trial then.
It was being used, yeah, but of course there was no, I don't think the National DNA database started up until quite a bit later. I mean, one of the first cases was actually in Leicester, the groundbreaking case in the world was in Leicester. And of course the guy responsible, Colin Pitchfork, he was released quite recently and he's had to go back in on parole because he's broken the conditions of his parole. But that was the first case in the world to be proved by DNA. And I think that was mid-80s. Yeah, so yeah, it was something that was beginning to come in, and it was really in its infancy, and I didn't really get the opportunity to have much anything much to do with it really, but it always fascinated me, and I got into it more after I left the job and followed it with a great deal of interest, and then of course for this last book. I had to do a huge amount of research to catch up on it, yeah. But it was fascinating. It is a really fascinating thing. I also incorporated genealogy with it because their way of using DNA with genealogy, which they do quite a lot, is quite different from the way that the police forces around the world will use it. A different method of searching and different objectives really. In police DNA, they're more often than not they're trying to prove a specific DNA match, whereas with genealogy they're looking at what's called familial DNA and trying to track down relatives. Now, of course, they do start to use familial DNA with police research and police DNA, but it's not something that their algorithms on the computers are really set up that keenly to do. So my idea was to get a professional genealogist involved on a particular part of the plot, and she became a main character. And of course, it was another thing that was interesting to me. I got involved in a lot of research on that, so much so that I thought, well, I need to know more about this. So I sent off my own spit sample for a DNA test onto Ancestry DNA and find out how that all worked as well. So I could write fairly confidently with that when it came through.
Were you using familial DNA differently to how I would?
Yeah.
Because I have quite an interest in DNA. It's what I studied at university.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I would talk about familial DNA in terms of tracing your Y chromosomal DNA or your mitochondrial DNA, which is very different to, I think, how you're using the term.
That's right, yeah. I mean, you probably know more about it than I do, but the main searching methods used by the police on the national DNA database. You know, the idea of it is to trace a particular person from a sample. That is the main reason why they're doing it. Although, of course, they don't stick to that all the time, because they do venture into familial DNA as well. But in genealogy, it is more a case of wanting to track down distant relatives who may be very vaguely connected to yourself, to build up the family tree. And it really, I mean, on my own, it was quite astonishing, really, when it came through, because they tracked down, I think it was 237 different people who were on their database, that is Ancestry DNA, who were either quite strongly connected to me or very distantly related to me.
So you can't always trust the family history DNA sites, though, because people have sent off their dog's DNA.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I know. There was some truth in it, because it quickly turned up some relatives that I knew who, you know, who'd also done it, but and then one or two other very vaguely connected ones who had got an idea were connected to the family. So it was good. But yeah, I know what you're saying, and I could see from comments put on by people that sometimes they weren't all that impressed with what had happened. Yeah. And there's that many different sites now as well. There's several different companies that are doing it, aren't there? So you know, and I don't know whether they mingle all the data together. So you're only, most of the time, you're going to be limited to how many people are on your, you know, on the site that you're using. But it's always much bigger than the police DNA. I think, I'm not sure now, but I think the UK NDNAD is. Holds about 7 million, I think now. It might be a bit more than that, but say Ancestry.com is well over 20 million now. So it's a vastly bigger database.
So going off to your other books, did you get inspired by real cases for those, or have you just drawn on sort of your knowledge?
For the early books, the Of Lies series, yeah, mostly. Everybody tends to write differently, but my stories have always seemed to evolve from most of the time from a daft idea that started off, and I've started to write, and then the story started to evolve. I mean, the first one, the Cathedral of Lies, it started off with an idea in my mind of, you know, how you could dispose of a body quite successfully without anybody finding it. And it then went on more deeply into the story with a need to find a valuable unsolved real crime. I wanted something to, I seem to be inspired more with real, if something's got some reality to it. And I managed to snatch onto a case of a stolen painting that happened back in the 30s. It's never been solved. A really interesting, fascinating case. And I managed to incorporate some of that in the story. And that did involve a trip over to Belgium with myself and the wife. So that was a bonus as well. But it involved that did involve a lot of research, yeah. But the actual police procedure of the crime scenes back home in the UK and things, most of that was still in my mind, you know, and I was fairly up to date with that. And I'd still got quite a lot of old colleagues who were still working in the job when I wrote that one, so I could still call on a few people to wise me up on you know, what the things I wasn't sure of. That went on into number 2, Field of Lies, and again inspired by true events, inspired by the Staffordshire Hoard, and of course that involved quite a lot of research into the Staffordshire Hoard as well. So again, I've always been interested in history and archaeology, so I was able to go to the Potteries Museum and view the Staffordshire Hoard itself as well, into the bargain. So bonuses all the way along. And sorry, yeah.
I used to love the Potteries Museum. Does it still have the Spitfire?
Yes, it does. They've just had it completely refurbished and made a little little better, because it was quite almost a sort of skeleton of what it was originally when it was built, when it was on display in the museum. But now they've had it really refurbished, and it's a superb thing now. And of course, we've got the Spitfire cafe across the road as well, which is adjoining the Mitchell Memorial Theatre, which was named after Reginald Mitchell, who invented the Spitfire, designed the Spitfire. So yeah, it's a fabulous museum. We're very lucky. Yeah, we're very lucky that some of the exhibits that they've got on there, especially to do with the potteries itself, are stunning. Yeah, and of course Arnold Bennett, one of our most famous authors, sits outside. His bronze statues right outside the museum as well.
There's an Arnold Bennett writing prize, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
One who's won it, I think, in the
Yes,
past.
Jan. You'll know Jan. Yeah, she won it. I think since COVID, it's everything's come to a stop. So, Jan writes some great stuff. Yeah, sometimes concentrating on Second World War style thriller stories. Yeah, she does very well. I've put my last book in for the Arnold Bennett Award this time, actually, but it's gone over 2 years with COVID interrupting everything. It's not just it's always usually every 12 months, but of course COVID's interrupting, so it's going to be over 2 years.
Sam, one of our admin and just all around good person, that says, "You've been busy, John. Quite a few books to read. Where did the idea for Doug Taylor come from?"
The idea for Doug Taylor, yeah, it's funny. It's funny, really, that you do tend to use a real person for different characters, and I think Doug Taylor was a mix of several people that I used to work with. Probably took all the best bits out. Most of those real people didn't have all those good qualities, but and then trying to think up a decent name. Sometimes people come up with a name that's a little bit too fanciful for me. I'd rather it to be more down to earth and have some reality to it. So sometimes for me characters, I'll look in the phone book or I'll think of somebody I used to work with, or even a group that I used to deal with, and use part of their name for the actual name. But as for the actual character themselves, they usually come from somebody who's in my mind at some stage. And very often people have come to me and said, "Oh, I know who you were talking about when you used that character." Yeah, so most of the time I have to keep it quiet.
Sorry, one of our members, Andrew from Nottingham, says he knows your books are on Amazon, but are your books available in audio?
No, they're not. It's something I should be looking at as a hold my hands up and say, I'm absolutely useless with IT and social media. Just doing this has been a nightmare for me. But I've seen that we can get audiobooks done a lot more reasonably than they used to be. I must say I'm not really all that much for the computerized version. I do think that they've got to be narrated properly by someone. Even the very best computer programs can't, not for me anyway, don't really hack it with bringing over the right inflection in the voice and things like that. So no, it is something I should be looking at. But of course, to do it properly, have a book properly narrated, it is a very expensive caper.
Sam has asked if there's any parts of your career as an author that have gone differently than you expected.
It's a bit bad on the audio there. I couldn't quite catch that. Sorry.
Are there any parts of your career as an author that have gone differently than you expected?
Probably all of them, really. You start off thinking that you know it all, and then you come away quite disillusioned and think, well, no, I don't. I mean, I've been very lucky that I've had a lot of people who I can turn to ask questions of. People are more experienced than I. Even at 71, I'm still learning. But yeah, I mean, with writing some of the books, I suppose you look back and people like Arnold Bennett and those back in Victorian times, he was there scribing away possibly the dipping his pen into an ink bottle and writing by oil lamp, and here we are tapping away on a laptop and being able to delete and copy paste and all this sort of thing. And that poor guy was there writing massive tomes like the old wives' tale and bringing out amazing pieces of work. So yeah, I've found that sometimes I've gone into a particular section of a story, and I thought that was pretty pleased with that. But then as the story progresses, I think, no, that doesn't work so well now. So it's so easy in a way to be able to go back and change things around, but it is pretty annoying when you put a lot of work into it. What I tend to do is copy paste bits that are lumps that I'm taking out and putting them on a separate file just in case they come in handy. It's in another book, you know. So yeah, things change as you're going along. The storyline will change. You'll get into some particular part of a story much later in the event, and you think, you know, I could make this such a better book if I went back, now that I've done this latest bit, if I went back and changed that earlier part round. So things are always going to be changed around, I think.
What do you think about police procedures in other books? Do you ever get really grumpy with them on like TV or in other things?
I do, yeah, I do. I know I'm quite out of date with procedure, but when something's glaringly obvious, something that really wouldn't happen, it does annoy me. I think we've all got people that we can ask to get things right, and when we try to write a police procedure, we should really try hard to get it right. I mean, I'm the most awful person to watch any of these television programs with, and my wife sometimes wants to send me out the room when I start shouting at the television, saying, "It wouldn't happen like that. That would never happen," because it spoils everybody else's story sometimes. But some things are done really well. The Colin Sutton episodes of The Night Stalker. I don't know if he's done them in a book, but I would imagine he has done. Fabulous stories, and of course they're absolutely so accurate in the police procedure of them. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that I do get irritated when I read something that's not right, and it is a shame because sometimes it can be difficult to know if you've got a really good story going, and then one particular bit of police procedure might come in and knock it off its legs altogether if you stick to the facts. So I think sometimes, you know, we should allow liberties to be taken, but sometimes it can be annoying as well.
I have that problem with things like CSI. I got banned from watching it because they get the so badly wrong.
Yeah.
Please house that it all the time. Leslie, one of our members, has said, "Bless me, but I'm still sounding rough," which is really nice. Thanks, Leslie. Oh. It's true though. Someone has asked if you've ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process.
What do you mean whilst I'm writing? If I've ever acted out a scene? I mean, I do that all the time, yeah. I do that so often. Not necessarily an entire scene, but certainly the way things are said or done, or even trying to describe a physical action. I'll go through the motions so that I can describe it more accurately, and it really works for me. Yeah, I do that a lot, and it's a really good help. It's a really good helping hand. There's nothing better than having the scene properly described in a book, and it really helps the reader so much and brings so much more enjoyment to it.
Are all your books still set in Staffordshire?
They are, yeah. I mean, the first one, Cathedral of Lies, it actually starts off in Exeter, so it doesn't start in Staffordshire. It starts down in Exeter, and then it moves up to Staffordshire, where a body's found, and then it eventually makes its way all the way over to Belgium. So it's not set in Staffordshire all the time, but quite a lot of it is. It goes up to Cannock Chase and places like that as well. The second one is set almost completely in Staffordshire, with a little visit over into Derbyshire, but that's set almost entirely in Staffordshire. And the third one, Guardian of Lies, is set in the UK, but it starts in Staffordshire and it moves all around the country and ends up in Scotland. And my only trip to Scotland has ever been to Edinburgh, which I'm ashamed to say, but I've been there on Google Earth several times for that book.
Have you ever been in Exeter Airport? It's tiny.
Yes, I've been to Exeter Airport. Yeah, I flew down for a retirement do once of somebody that I knew had transferred. Yeah, so rather than be lazy and drive down, another chap flew from Manchester down to Exeter. Yeah.
Yeah, I've flown from Manchester to Exeter a few times. It's quite a nice little trip. It's better than the plane.
Yeah. Yes, it was. It's a nice little airport, and it was in the days of no COVID tests. Yeah.
Sam has said, is there a delicate balance when you incorporate black humour, making it realistic without pushing it too far?
Yeah, it certainly happened a lot, and I must say that no excuses. It was one of the things that used to get people by, and when there were some awful things going on. So it was. This is a fact of life. Black humour exists in the police force. I'm sure it still does now, because they still have to deal with some dreadful things. It's important to make things realistic, and I've certainly brought black humour into my books. Not greatly, but I have done. Yes, probably. I would say probably along the right lines of, in regard of how much it actually does happen.
Sorry, I'm just going to keep interrupting our chat to cough occasionally.
That's all right. Yeah.
I apologise. Laura, I wanted to read who'd said this comment. Laura Hamilton said she's just discovered Cathedral of Lies whilst mooching online, and it's already in her TBR pile.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, tell her to get reading.
But you just have. Donna Morfitt said good evening as well.
Hi, Donna.
It doesn't always come up with the names at the side, so if I look down, I'm just checking who's commented. One of Sam's favourite questions that she's not asked yet is, what's the most recent thing that you've written, without giving away spoilers? It's the most recent scene you've written.
You mean the most recent book?
For the most recent scene in your work of progress.
Ah, right, yeah. I'm working on something at the moment, and I've still yet to be really inspired and motivated by what I've done so far. Again, it's something that actually comes from reality. I remember once when we had an amnesty on knives, and we got a great big box of knives that had been bought in, given in by different people, that were all for disposal. And it was noticed that in amongst these knives was an amazing SAS dagger, a very rare collectible item. So much so that even though it had been handed in as under the amnesty, we found out who brought it in, and contacted the person and said to him, "Do you realise what you are throwing away?" And he did, and he wanted it to be got rid of. I don't know actually what happened to it, whether it was smashed up. I mean, it's an awful thing. It's a terrible thing, but it's a piece of history, which something which shouldn't be. I wouldn't have thought, in my own opinion, shouldn't be forgotten. It shouldn't be smashed up. It's something that should be there to represent the dreadful things that went on in the Second World War. Now, that inspired an idea that I'm working on at the moment. This SAS dagger being used as a murder weapon in this present day, and then the possibility of tracing it back to where it had come from. Has it been found taken as a trophy of war, or where it's come from? So that's the idea that I'm working on at the moment. Yeah. Again, something that's involving research to find out about these SAS daggers.
What's the most interesting thing that you've ever found when you've been researching?
Everything's been interesting, really. The problem with me is, once I latch onto something like that, I really can't leave it alone until I've found out as much as possible about it. As I say in Cathedral of Lies, it involved an unsolved theft, a very valuable unsolved crime, which took me over to Belgium to research it a little bit more, and only because I found it so interesting. It was such a fascinating subject, and it ended up with me going on from that and reading an enormous book that had been written called what was it called now? They even made a film about it, and I've gone and forgotten what it was called. It was all about the treasures that were stolen during the Second World War by the Nazis. Can't think what it's called now. It'll come to me. But yeah, that was a very interesting subject. Of course, I knew a little bit about the Staffordshire Hoard, which is one of the things that inspired the second book. And of course, that was interesting, finding out quite a lot more than you would normally find out just from documentaries and things like that, going into it in such detail. And jewellery came into that as well. And in the last book in that series, Guardian of Lies, funnily enough, by chance, it turned out that book was based on a nerve agent attack in the UK, albeit a crime thriller involving detectives. That was an aside this suddenly came about, and of course then the Sergei Skripal attack in Salisbury happened, and that happened just a few weeks after I'd brought that book out. But getting into finding out about nerve agents was a really interesting subject, and I bought a book called Biological Warfare, which had been written by an ex-KGB agent, which I found really interesting. So it was a very, very interesting subject, that was, yeah. And of course, DNA as well, the last book. All so interesting.
So for anyone who's watching who doesn't know, do you want to tell us a bit about the Savage Hoard?
Yeah. The Staffordshire Hoard was a cache of Anglo-Saxon treasure that was discovered in a field near to Rugeley in Staffordshire by a metal detectorist, and it was described as being one of probably the second biggest Anglo-Saxon hoard ever found. The amount of gold and jewellery that was found was phenomenal. And the things that this chap dug out of the ground were just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. I think it had been there for 1,300 years. And of course, when he actually disclosed what he'd been finding, the archaeologists went and did proper research and searched the field properly and found a lot more. And it became apparent that the spot where it had been buried 1,300 years ago was actually in a ward when it was originally buried, and near to quite a main thoroughfare between different places. And of course, were never able to find who buried it, but that particular part of the country was a main Anglo-Saxon stronghold at that particular time, and it was all cleaned and everything, and gone through by the archaeologists and catalogued. Hundreds and hundreds of items were found. Some of it's in the London Museum, and quite a big portion of it is on display most of the time at the Potter's Museum as well.
Which is in Stoke-on-Trent. Just in case anyone else doesn't know.
Yeah.
So are you ever tempted to write outside of the crime genre?
Well, I've already written a mostly humorous bio of my police service, so I've done that one. That's called that's on Kindle and paperback from Amazon. That's called The Nick of Time, and it still ticks along. It sales every year, especially at Christmas time. People buy the paperback version quite a lot. So it's quite an interesting read. I enjoyed writing it. That was really probably the first thing that I started on. I've also written a short story which is just on Kindle called The Vampire of the Villas, which involved a case that I was actually involved in myself as a young 22-year-old uniformed cop on the beat. So that's quite an interesting little story. But I say it's only a short story, so it's only about a sort of 45-minute read. But yeah, I've got other ideas in my mind to write different things. You come up with odd ideas, don't you? You'll just see an everyday item and think, oh, could you just write about that? I mean, I picked a cricket ball up the other day. I thought, could you write a story about a cricket ball? Not maybe, I don't know. But then, different ideas went through my mind, and I thought, well, yeah, maybe you could write something that might be a bit interesting, totally off the crime scene at all, unless you could have it, unless you could incorporate it into a crime novel. I don't know. Maybe you could.
Andrew's curious if you visited police HQ in Belgium.
Say that again. Sorry, Caroline.
Andrew is curious if you visited the police HQ in Belgium when you were there.
No, I didn't. No, we only visited. We went to Ghent. I did actually. Yeah, having said that, we did go past the police station just out of interest to see what it looked like, because it does actually figure in the story. The actual police station in Ghent does figure in the story. But no, it would have been a bit too much of a language nightmare, I think, to have got involved in asking them too many questions. But yeah, we went to the cathedral, which is the mixed name Cathedral of Lies, and it's after Ghent Cathedral that it's named, and researched the theft that happened there back in 1933, I think. But it was a fascinating visit. It's a beautiful city. If ever anybody fancies a visit over in that direction, yeah, beautiful, very interesting.
Oh, Donna has said she's adding the police memoir to her TBR when this is finished.
Again, I couldn't quite catch all that. Sorry.
Donna says she's adding the police memoir to her TBR.
Oh, good. Good. I'm pretty confident that you'll be laughing most of the way. Some of it's sad as well, but most of it is really quite funny. I mean, some of the things that used to go on were hilarious when you look back at them. And when I was writing it, I started to write it, and it's funny how one story brings another memory back. And so it took me a while, but yeah, I put together quite a few comical episodes. I wanted to say one or two heart-rending little tales as well that happened. I lost quite a few friends over the years who died on duty, so I've mentioned all of those at the beginning of the book as a sort of a memoir towards them.
Someone wants to know how you felt when the fictional case about the nerve agent was so close to the real news story.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I only bought Guardian of Lies out a few weeks before, and then suddenly appearing on the news as this dreadful thing that's going on in Salisbury. And immediately I said to myself, this has got to be a nerve agent attack by the looks of it. And of course it was, and I'd already included Portondown and Salisbury in Guardian of Lies. I mean, I'd concentrated on a different nerve agent because I didn't know anything about Novichok until that case. So I'd concentrated on VX, which I thought was the deadliest thing of all. But of course, there you go. You can't get it always right. I say I'd used a book by an ex-KGB agent as one of my research tools, and that was fascinating. Some of the things that had gone on, and of course, he didn't just stop there with the attack on the Skripals. Then it went on, and the two people were picked up the discarded Novichok, and one of them died. And of course, Nick Bailey, the police sergeant, he ended up having to be pensioned off because of his contact with it. And then, of course, we saw that later, a few months later, the Korean brother of the North Korean leader was assassinated at was it Dar es Salaam airport by VX again. That was VX. Oh yeah, that was VX. So that wasn't Novichok. That was VX, I think. So yeah, it was amazing to, you know. I thought, goodness me, I'm going to get a knock on the door from MI5, but they didn't.
And they maybe know that there are crime writers out there.
Yeah. Get Mr. Putin to come round and see me. Yeah.
Are you ever asked to be an expert for other authors? Are you ever asked to call on for like police procedure advice?
Yeah, quite often, really. Yeah, and of course I can't always come up with the answer because most people are writing about things that have happened nowadays. But I can nearly always find out, and certainly that offer's open to anybody who's looking in and is writing it. If there's anything I can help with. A friend asked me recently a particular question. It was something that was outside my box, but I've still got a lot of colleagues who are retired. And also some who are still working, who are on different Facebook sites, and I can turn to them quite easily, and they're always really willing to help. And I've often put people in touch directly with other authors, directly with people. Someone recently wanted to know, quite a while ago actually, wanted to know about undercover officers, and I was able to put her in touch with an undercover, former undercover officer. He said he wouldn't have done it unless he'd retired, and he had just retired, so he was more than happy to help out. And of course, authors are great. They're so helpful. In my experience, anyway, they're always so willing to help each other out. And that was actually for Leslie from Tots, who wanted to know something, and she's been such a help to me. She really has. Yeah, and if I need to ask her anything, I can do, and she knows the same. And so many other authors as well have asked me things, and I'm able to go back and ask them stuff as well. So it works well, yeah.
So you've been asked if anybody's recognised themselves in your books because of their partial name or characteristics.
No, not recognise themselves. I've been pretty careful about that, but one or two people who maybe haven't read my books have been identified by other people. Say, I know you were talking about there. That was so and so, wasn't it? And I've said, well, yeah, it might have been.
And also, did the first Doug Taylor idea come from him as a character, or did the story idea come first?
I'm sorry, I missed that again. Sorry.
Did the first Doug Taylor idea come from him as a character, or did the story idea come first?
No, the story idea came with a possibly successful method of disposing of a body, and then the detective. And then actually, I found myself back in Stone CID, which was a strange office because it used to be the court building. That room did, very high ceilinged, and DI's office was set up a few stairs from that office, and that idea came. And then this figure, I wanted him to be a little bit macho, and I've worked with quite a few people who were, so it wasn't too difficult to find. And I managed to amalgamate him with a few other good traits and ideas from other people I worked with. And then it was a matter of a name. And as I say, I didn't like too fanciful a name, so somehow or other I struck on the name Doug Taylor. I think I found myself going onto a site for names. That's right, I did. And this name Doug Taylor popped out, and I thought, well, that's quite useful. I thought, oh, I might go with that. I'd already thought of some other name which didn't work that I'd found on a monument somewhere. Yeah, that's right. But I thought Doug Taylor worked quite well. Quite a punchy name that fitted the character that had drawn. So I changed his name to Doug Taylor, probably when I got about halfway into the book.
I think it's Martin Edwards who uses football players.
Sorry. Again, sorry.
I think Martin Edwards uses football players.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, anything that churns up a name that sounds realistic and usable, that fits in with your character, then why not? Yeah. I say I've even looked through the phone book a time or two, and used something out of there.
Good evening, John.
Hi.
So I'm Kaz. Kaz has subbed me in while she holds on to the last of her voice, I believe.
Oh dear.
So first thing I want to ask you is about settings in your books.
Yeah.
Have you a cellar, a police station cellar used in your one of your books?
Yeah.
Is that real? Any of the settings real? Or
yeah, it's absolutely real. Yeah. You're not from Stoke-on-Trent, no. Well, it was set in the police station, which was in Hanley, the main police station. It was a very big building. It was originally built as the headquarters of Stoke-on-Trent Police before they amalgamated with Staffordshire. And in my day, every office was in use. It was nothing went to waste. And it had downstairs. It had a large cell block with 10 male cells and I think about 6 female cells. And also off there, it had a shooting range where we could practice with .22 pistols, and it had an enormous basement, which was used for storing old case files and obviously cold case files as well. And it's exactly as described in that book. That's how I remember it. Sadly, that building's being sold off now. Staffordshire's hardly got any police stations left, I think. So I don't know. I think it's going to be retained as a building, but what purpose they're going to put it to, I don't know. But yeah, the basement is absolutely real, and you could access it down through down some stairs or in the lift. But you couldn't get out. You needed a special key because also down there was the armoury as well. There was a great big walk-in safe where we used to keep all the guns and things.
So, as you know, all of your books are on my list now to read.
Oh, good.
So
Wonderful.
I've done a quick frantic search. How often did you have to use the weapons?
In my day, it was pretty rarely. It was almost a bit of a perk, really, because you get a day off. Perhaps once a month, not a day off, but it was a day weapons training. And we go to there were 2 places that we used in my day. Things have changed now. In Staffordshire, we had an army base at Swinnerton, which is near to Stone, where I served later. And we used to go to that army base and train on several different firing ranges that they got there. One was an outdoor range where we used to use .38 pistols and shotguns. And the other was an indoor range, really interesting. I don't know if it's still there or not. But it was really state of the art, and it was used originally. The idea of it was for troops going to Northern Ireland when the Troubles were on. And it was actually constructed as a proper street with shops and houses on it. And at the end, there was even a pub, all very tackily named. The pub was called the Skillet Arms. Yeah. Oh dear. And there was even a pub. There was even a car parked in the street, and we didn't use 38s. We used to use .22s, .22 pistols, but they're deadly. I mean, you kill a person without shadow of doubt with a .22 pistol.
What kind of size are those pistols? I'm not familiar with. You'd think, being such a big crime fiction fan, that I'd know more.
Yeah, they were revolvers. So that's how far back I go. They were revolvers, and they were a .22 pistol that we used was pretty well the same size as a .38 Smith and Wesson revolver. It's just that the barrel was a lot narrower. So yeah, you're talking of a proper revolver. And you go down the street, and there'd be a control room behind you with bulletproof perspex. It wasn't glass on there, and they could control the lighting. They could make the car sound its own. They could make different targets pop up at the windows. And if a target popped up at the window that needed to be shot, you'd have to shoot it. And if you actually struck it, the target would automatically fall down. But of course, they could play tricks on you to try and catch you out. They could suddenly, there'd be a noise, you'd look over and there'd be a bloke holding a Black and Decker and this sort of thing, and if you shot him, then you were in trouble, or a woman holding a baby, this sort of thing. So it was really interesting. It was good fun. It was great. But we had another range as well. We used to go to. It's another army base in Whittington, near to Lichfield, and that was a different one altogether. Yeah, they got an outside range there as well, but they'd also got an indoor range, and that was different again. It was good. They used to show a film on a huge screen, and it was a film of an armed robbery, not a real one, obviously a stage thing, and different things would be going on in this armed robbery, and you would have to decide on the moment if you got to shoot someone or not. And once you shot, the bullet would penetrate a screen in front of the screen, and it would automatically stop the film, and then you'd be able to see, because the white light would be shining through where you'd shot, if you'd shot the guy or if you'd missed him. So yeah, that was interesting. I mean, I've been on armed jobs occasionally, but pretty rarely. I mean, one of the funny stories in the police bio was when we had the It's a Royal Knockout at Alton Towers. I don't know if you ever heard of this. It might be well before your time, but it was something that was arranged by the now defamed, what was his name, Stuart Hall, and we got most of the younger members of the royal family there, and we got to protect them. So I was on armed protection duty, and we'd all got shoulder holsters with 5-shot smaller Smith and Wesson revolvers, but nobody had to take the revolvers out, of course. But the thing was, it absolutely threw it down with rain so much. It threw it down with rain, and they'd made us walk about half a mile in the rain. And if I had to shoot anybody, I don't think my gun had gone off. It was nearly rusted up. But there was some funny stories. I mean, what was funny was we weren't allowed to take the gun home with us because it was 2 days, but you could take the holster home with you, so you could get kitted up ready. And my kids were playing with this holster the night before. When I come to put it on the next day, I set off. And when I was given my gun the next day, I went to put my gun down into my holster, and there's a plastic quarter pistol inside.
I love that. I was going to ask you, are there any situations from real life that you would like to use in a book, but you just think nobody would ever believe it?
Yeah, it's funny though. And then you say, truth, fact is stranger than fiction sometimes. And it really is. So you do see, I don't know, perhaps you shouldn't draw a line. If you think something's worth writing about, I think you should write about it. Yeah, I mean, there's some weird things have happened to me over the years, and we've often said, crikey, if you told somebody this, they just wouldn't believe it was possible. But these things do happen, so it's not always. I mean, with procedure, yeah, you've got to draw the line, you've got to get it right. But with actual factual things happening, I think anything can happen. Unless you're going to say that Elvis has really come back to life or something. I don't know. That would take it a bit far.
Do you were fictionally murdered, would you want Doug Taylor to investigate it?
What, so if somebody was murdered, would I want Doug Taylor?
If you were fictionally murdered, would you want Doug Taylor to investigate it? She gets me right in trouble, does Donna, with these questions.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, but yeah. Well, I mean, he's the main man. Yeah, he's the main man. He'd solve it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd put all my money on Doug Taylor getting it right. Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Other than the cellar, are there any more real settings used?
Yeah, Stone Police Station, quite a lot of Stone Police Station that came out in Cathedral Lies, and well, it came out in all the books really. Yeah, it touched on Stone. So yeah, that came out. Cannock Chase, that came out in Cathedral Lies, and I'd been to Cannock Chase on several jobs. I don't know how it came to be, but Stone Police Station was only a small police station, but it actually covered an enormous area, and it took in a great deal of Cannock Chase, which is, yeah, I don't know if you know, but it's an area of outstanding beauty. So it's never been messed about with, and there's a lot of wild. Without doubt, there must be a lot of bodies buried up on Cannock Chase. We've had quite a few murders that have happened up there. I mean, the terrible case going back into the into the 60s of Leslie Morris, the Cannock Chase murderer who murdered, I think, 3 girls, and awful murders. Those took place in Cannock Chase. I dealt with an extremely interesting suicide, strangely enough, on Cannock Chase that turned into quite a quest to find out the truth, you know. So yeah, interesting place, Cannock Chase. Other places, yeah, real places. Yeah, I mean, I used Porton Down in Guardian of Lies to find out quite a bit about that. I mean, you can't go in there and visit and wander around and have a look around, but you can see things on Google Earth, and you can drive past and things like that. So yeah, I really am a one for using real places. I really will do, because it's so good if you can see a real place, you can really describe it so much better. And it doesn't matter if people haven't been there. And you can also change bits around if they don't fit. If there wasn't a gateway exactly there, then you can change it around and make it fit. But yeah, I really do like to use real places. They inspire the imagination.
You touched a little on black humour. What about things that I read you used to get up to different things, bit of mischief just to diffuse a difficult situation? What kind of things could we have expected from you? I can see the glint in your eye. I could see then you've got a lot of stories. Are you going through the Rolodex to see which ones are appropriate?
Well, I mean, some of the things that happened weren't always black humour, but they were so damn funny, but awful, really. I mean, we always used to have to search lofts in people's houses when we were searching for a particular reason. Sometimes we'd be looking for somebody or something. And one guy fell through the ceiling once when he was up there. Can you imagine some giant detective walking across those? Because they didn't just have boarded air, they were just like stepping across, and you could often hear the creaking upstairs. You're thinking, God, I hope he's not going to come through. And then this guy did. He came straight through the ceiling and landed right in front of the sergeant, and just stood up, brushed himself down, and said, "No, nothing up there, Sarge." So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I ought to really go back and have a think about that. And I mean, there were lots of black humour things, terrible things, really, that you shouldn't laugh about. But sometimes, if you didn't, you just go crackers, because there were some awful things. I mean, when I was only sort of 19-year-old cop, when I first became a constable, within a few weeks I was dealing with dead bodies, and you know, and you deal with what was called a sudden death. You probably deal with 2 sudden deaths a week, you know, and you see it hardens you to it a little bit. And you always try to be help people and be careful about what you're saying, you know, when you're with the relatives, because it matters. It's awful, but sometimes it got to you, and you know, and there was an only way out, you know. And if somebody cracked a joke about it, you'd think, oh God, that's sick, but then it might help you through the day.
Kaz has asked, are you ever tempted to leave a body in the Spitfire? It could have been done by the ghost that haunts it.
Yeah, if you could get up to it and put one in it, yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I think somebody would spot you because it's indoors. Yeah, yeah.
And Andrew, hi Andrew, wants to know, would you be happy to see an adaptation of one of your books on TV? Because Andrew would really like that.
I'd love it. I would love it. You know, so many people have said that that they like to see the books as a film or as a TV series. I'd love it. I really would love it. And I'd have to put, if they wanted to alter things around, you know, I know which they do a lot, then I'd have to put up with it. But yeah, of course I'd love it. Yeah. I mean, some of the thing is, you start off being really biased and think, oh yeah, this is really good. I should do really well with this. And then after a bit, you think, it's not all that good, is it? But some bits of them, I really think that they could go places. Well, I'm hopeless with social media and IT. I'm absolutely useless. My daughter uses it a lot for her business, and I keep on tapping her up to help me out a little bit, and she does, but I think she soon gets fed up.
We've really not got long left. I know I just ducked in at the end, but I'm going to ask you one of our favourite questions, which is memorable moments for you so far since you became an author.
Memorable moments so far. You know, something that probably lifted my spirits and still does is when you get a good review on a book. When you see that somebody's written a good review and you know that they've really enjoyed it, and you've done something that somebody's been able to sit back and spend many hours reading and really enjoy it. That really does make it worthwhile. I just love that.
And what a lovely way to end. So do you have a book that you'd like to talk about just before we finish?
Well, yeah, even maybe show you. That's the latest one. Silence Screams the Loudest.
She's quite intimidating, that lady on the cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I just really enjoyed the research. I mean, it took me back. I mean, I had the misfortune to go to countless postmortems, but things are very, very different nowadays, and I needed to get it right. So I phoned up the mortuary. Well, I found out first of all they don't do things how they used to do. We used to use a local mortuary. How long? I'm nearly out of time. I have to be careful.
It's okay. I'll let you finish. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, we used to use local mortuaries with a Home Office pathologist, but now the rules say that it's got to be what's called a super mortuary, and we've actually got a super mortuary now in Stoke-on-Trent, which is at the hospital, at the Stoke Royal Hospital. So I thought, well, take the bull by the horns. I rung up and said, is it possible for me to have a visit? And they said, yeah, why not? So I went up to the mortuary one day. Of course, nothing was going on. They picked a time when everything was quiet. And they showed me around. Amazing facilities, so interesting. They've got 4 huge, they've got one enormous autopsy theatre and 4 autopsy tables. One's called a bariatric table for large patients, a viewing room, everything that we didn't have years ago. So really interesting. And also I needed to know about a skeletal analysis, which is a form of post-mortem on a skeleton. It's called a skeleton analysis, and that's done by a forensic anthropologist. I was really lucky, because whilst I was at the mortuary attendant told me about the country's most famous forensic anthropologist, which is Professor Dame Sue Black. I got a lot of questions. I thought, well, again, take the bull by the horns. I emailed her, and she was brilliant. She sent me back an amazing catalogue of answers to all my questions, and she even read and reviewed my book. So fabulous. More help of several other people. So helpful people are. You know, I even got help from a professional concert cellist. The story incorporates a cello. So I managed to get hold of a cellist with the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and he not only answered all the questions, but invited me and my wife to one of his concerts at Birmingham. So bonus, yeah, to win, yeah. So I loved writing them.
Bonus.
Yeah, fantastic, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, giving up your Sunday evening. Thank you to everyone who's taken part, and Kaz, we love you. Feel better soon.
Yeah, I hope the cough's better, Kaz. Thanks very much, and thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I was a bit of trepidation because I didn't think I made a very good job with the intro, and I didn't know what I really should have